Our next speaker up right now after lunch is Tiffany Jernigan. And her fun fact is she is currently learning French, and she has decided that she will give her entire presentation in said language. So I'm very excited to hear the word go routine in French. So Tiffany, take it away.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to talk about how to raise a gopher in record time, and I'm Tiffany Jernigan. So, raising a gopher, you want to make sure that they eat more than half of their body weight in food a day. And since you care about what kind of food they eat, you want to make sure you give them plants and vegetables. Okay, not serious. So, let's see, I'm not a gopher farmer. Oh wait, I was supposed to be serious. So a little bit of background about me. I majored in electrical engineering at Georgia Tech, and then I started working at Intel as a product development engineer. For that, it was digital circuits. It had no software at all. And then in May 2015, I switched to a group at Intel that was working on Intel Snap that was entirely in Go. And I hadn't done any Go before, and actually, I hadn't even heard of Go before then. And so the first logo there is, I drew that since we didn't have anything when we were open sourcing. And then after that, I was doing some contract work for Docker, working on their orchestration workshop. And then in 2 weeks, I am starting at Amazon as a developer advocate on their ECS team, which I'll be working on Code and Go, and then conferences and all those other types of things. So you've obviously heard of Go because you're all here. So perhaps maybe you're interested in learning the language. It's new for you. Maybe you want to start on the right foot. Perhaps you've started a little bit. You want to get better at it, learn more. Or maybe you feel you're pretty good at Go, but you know there are people around you that fit the other categories that are trying to learn, that you want to go and teach them how to be better at Go, where to start. So why do you want to learn Go? So Go is no longer niche. It's in the place that was previously occupied by Node.js and Ruby and other programming languages. It's readable, it's fast, it compiles to a single binary. These are all things that you probably already know and would be telling other people as well. So I'm going to start with where I started with programming in Go, and then some of the other websites that I came across, because there was like the Tour of Go, there were Go docs, but there were a bunch of other things that I found that were super helpful. And then with that, there were a bunch of tools that I found that made programming in Go a lot more easy. And then I went to a workshop. There were online trainings that I found that were helpful as well. And then, of course, you have to have coding practice. You can't just go read something a bunch of times. Maybe some people can. But generally, it's best to read something, watch something, and then practice it yourself. And then for Go, as many of you know, it's not just about writing the code or the code itself. There's also a really great community. And then with the communities, there's going to things like conferences, which you're all at right now. So where to begin? So the place that I started off at, and many other people start off at, is the Tour of Go. So that is not what I wanted to go to. So this is Tour of Go. So it has a bunch of different topics. It will explain things on the left side. On the right, you can actually run the code. So say for this one, it's the welcome to the playground. If you hit run, it'll tell you at the bottom that it's welcome to the playground. And then there are a bunch of other topics. It goes from like the absolute basics through more advanced topics, such as things like concurrency. And then one of the great things about this is it's written in a bunch of different languages, so it's not only for people who are primarily like English speakers. And then it's also available online. So in addition to that, a lot of people are like, OK, here's the Tour of Go, and here's the Go docs. Go read your source code. Go play at the Tour of Go. So for the Go docs, here's like the crypto one. So it'll give a bunch of different functions. It'll give an explanation about what it does, so you have an idea. And then if you want to learn more, there's a blog that'll explain like what exactly are Go docs. It's a lot like how there's like Java docs and some other languages have docs as well. And then this is also offline. So one of the great things is like say you can go practice your Tour of Go. You can have your Go docs on like an airplane if you don't have Wi-Fi, if you don't want to pay for it. Or if you're like in a cabin in the middle of the forest, you can still do it. So then there's also the source code, which you can easily get to from the Go docs. So if you're at the Go doc and you're like, OK, so here it tells me what it does, but I want to see what does this code actually do. So if you go and click on it, it will jump to the code for it, and you can see, hey, what is happening in this code to get a better idea, and it'll have all the comments in it as well. So those were really useful for me in the beginning when I was like, OK, here's the tour of Go, here's some functions, I don't know exactly what they're doing or what I want to do in order to do this example, so I would go to the Go doc, go look at the source code. So then there's also a bunch of different websites that are out there in addition to those ones that are really useful. So like there's GoByExample. GoByExample basically has a bunch of different topics that you can go pick, like say arrays, etc. So if for that one, like here's an example for arrays. It'll go and explain like what's happening with the code, and then on the right side there's a bunch of code. And if you go to the very bottom, it will actually show what the output is if you ran it. So you could go paste this, you can make some edits, and see what happens with the code. And then also, and here's the main page. Like you can see there's things like very basic things like if, else, and then if you want to go to like Go routines or channels, you can just click on those and it'll give an example of how those work. So one of the other sites that I came across that I found particularly useful was SocketLoop. So unlike the GoByExample, where you could pick like arrays or some specific topic, this one goes and there's like, it shows an example of doing something. So for example, when I was trying to figure out how do I go and untar a file, if I'm in Linux, you just have one command, and that's all you need. But there's a lot more to do when you're actually using Go, trying to do that, and I was not sure what libraries I needed, etc. So I went to Google and looked up how do you untar in Go. So I came across SocketLoop and it had examples of how to do that. So there's usually a lot more code. So like for this one, like unlike the other ones where it's arrays or if, etc., this is edge detection. So there's for this one, instead of like the side of how GoByExample is, where explain things, this one has like inline comments. But as you can see, like it has a lot of code. It goes through the entire thing of how you do this. So in addition to things like those example pages, there's also a bunch of blogs. A lot of people in the Go community are prolific writers. So one of the ones that people usually come across first is the official GoLang blog. So for this one of the great things is that it will go and explain like what all has changed since the last release. It'll have a new update for what's happening there. And it's written by people who are actually working on Go at Google. So the one that I found the most useful was Dave Cheney's blog. I came across this when I was working with channels. He has a bunch of very frequent informative posts. He's every like few days or weeks or so, there's always something new up there. It'll have like a bunch of explanations. It'll have code, so it'll help you learn something. And then he also has a page for like other resources for when you're trying to learn Go. So there's like books, there's websites, there's trainings. So like for the specific one that I had is like I was having a channel panic. What's going on? I don't understand. So I came across this thing, and it just says ascend to a closed channel panics. And it has an explanation. It shows example code, and that's all I needed because I was like, I don't know how channels really work. So there's also Bill Kennedy's blog. One of the web pages on this I found super useful was for using pointers in Go. People have often used pointers in C, or maybe you've never used pointers at all, but this gives an explanation of how to go and do that. And another one is the Gopher Academy. One of the things I really like about this one is it's written by different people. So you get different people's perspectives, different types of writing, different types of coding. It's not just like one person's opinions or how they do something. So there were like blogs, there were like the tour of Go, etc. There's also a bunch of different trainings out there. Like one of the best things I think is online training, because you don't have to. You can do that from your home. You can do that from anywhere, as long as you have internet at that point in time. You can start it. You can pause it. You can repeat it as much as you want, and it doesn't bother anyone. So Todd McLeod, he has a YouTube page. And in addition to that, he also has a GitHub where you have like different chapters. You can pick on the different chapters, go paste the code, somewhere, run it, see what's happening with it. There's also things like Pluralsight. Either you need a membership or there's like 3-month trials, etc. And so Nigel Poulton has a class on there with different chapters of where to get started with Go. But in addition to that, there's also actual like in-person workshops. Like I attended Bill's workshop a few months after I started. I actually wish I had started it even earlier. Some people are afraid, oh, I don't know programming or I don't know Go, so I shouldn't be attending one of these workshops. Actually, you should, because they, at least for this workshop and many, many others, they start at the very basics and go through concurrency. They don't expect that you know everything off the bat. And then one of the things about this is that you can actually get on-site help. So like for this workshop, there were a bunch of examples, explaining things, writing things on the board, running code in the playground, which I'll show later. And then there would be exercises at the end of each chapter where you got to go, hey, make this thing work, run it. But if you had issues, unlike the online one, you could just be like, hey, I have a question, ask one of the TAs, ask one of the people, ask the person who's running the course, ask the person next to you, etc. It's just harder though because you can't pause time. I don't know if anyone has figured that out yet. I don't think so. So also there's books. Some people like ebooks just fine. Earlier there was the discussion about actual physical book. So lots of people like taking a book with them, going and reading. There's the Go programming language by Alan Donovan and Brian Kernighan. If you've used C, you've probably heard of the C programming language book, which is very popular. There's also a book called Go in Action by Bill Kennedy, Brian Kettleson, and Eric St. Martin. One of the things that I really liked about this book is for all of the code examples in there, you could go to the GitHub page, pull down the code, and run it yourself instead of having to go manually type it up and see, because that just takes forever. And I actually went to a meetup where we had book reading club. So it was for this book, and every week there would be a new chapter, and everyone would discuss what they were having questions on or things in the book. All right, so you've spent time playing with the tour. You've spent time looking at GoDocs, looking at different websites, but you need to spend more time actually practicing how to code. So there are a bunch of tools out there that make coding easier. So there's the Go Playground. For this one, it's great if you have like a single file that you're working with. So like say here's the playground. It looks very similar to the tour of Go, so you've been playing that, you know how it works. You can hit run, format. You can actually share it, which is really nice. However, if you're doing something that's like multiple files long, you probably want an actual editor. So what I've been using is VS Code with VS Code Go plugin, and it has a bunch of different features with that. Previously, I used Sublime. And earlier, there was the question of who uses Vim, and there was a pretty big audience of that, and people using Vim Go. So, but there are, of course, many more. It's not just those. There are IntelliJ, et cetera, that other people use. I just haven't used them. So with these plugins, so like Vim Go, or Sublime Go, or VS Code Go, there's tools like GoFumped. So this one is one of the biggest things about Go, if you don't already know. It formats your code to a specific way. There's no like debate anymore about like, should I use spaces? Should I use tabs? It decides for you. And I personally have it set to format on save. So as soon as I hit save, it'll automatically go and change that. So like say if I have some code and I decided, hey, I'm going to go tab this just because I feel like it. If I save it, it'll automatically format it for me, put it back to where it was supposed to be. There's also Go imports. So for Go, at the beginning, many of you may know that you have to put all the imports, and sometimes it can be tedious, like adding a certain import, deleting it every time that you remove some of your code. So Go imports will go and do that for you. It's actually also in the playground. If I can figure out how to get there. So like say right now you have Fumped. So say if I deleted this line, and then I hit format, it goes and deletes it. And then if I added a new thing, and I hit format, and now it says import. Otherwise, you would have to go and manually do that every single time that you make any change, removing something or adding something where you don't have another line of code calling that package. So then there's also autocomplete. It's not like how it is in your phone where you start typing something and you ended up sending the entirely wrong thing to your friend. It's like Google where you start typing, it'll give suggestions such as like this one where it's I hate it when I'm studying and a velociraptor throws bananas on me. It won't give you those kind of suggestions though. So say I'm on this line of code and I want to see what are my options with CLI. Obviously you can see there's string flag, but what else is there? So if I do CLI dot, you can see all the different things that you can put afterward. So like a context or a new app and all the methods, et cetera, that work with that. This is super useful when it's code that you're adding to, but you don't know exactly how it works. There's also GoodF, which I really like for new code. So when I started at Intel working on Snap, there was so much code and I had no idea how it worked. There'd be this function and I would have no idea what it did. So instead of spending the time doing like, hey, I'm going to go grep all my code and hope that I can find this one function, and maybe you have that same function name multiple times in other places, and now you'll have every single instance of that, and now you're like, is it this one or this one or this one? Not the best way to go about that. Instead, you should use GoodF. So say for this one, I want to know what it is. So in VS Code, you have there's multiple options. You can like do a peek at definition, which is really cool, where it'll just show like the example. It'll show that part of the code right there. Or you could actually go and jump to the code. So if you go to definition, it jumps to where that code is. So okay, so now there's that. You have editors, but you have to actually do some coding practice. So there's a bunch of sites out there that aren't specific to Go. Like there's HackerRank, there's CodeEval, but you can use Go for those. And then every single month, for the most part, there is a monthly Go challenge, and there are prizes for that. There's also projects. You could recreate a project that you've done previously. If you've done some other coding, you could find a project to do online. There's a Golang wiki. So there's different topics on there. There's stuff like astronomy or logging and stuff like Intel Snap, Docker, ECS. They're all open source. You can just add PRs, add code to other projects. So where I started at Intel when I was trying to figure out how the code worked, I started off at testing with one file, trying to figure out how that one worked, unit testing, switched later to integration, where it's multiple files, and then after that, features. But then after you do features, you need to repeat that by adding testing to that, so just that cycle of trying to figure out how the code works. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, there's also communities, so like your coworkers, there's Gopher Slack. So for Slack, I actually created a GothamGo channel, except for I don't think hardly anyone's in it. And then the thing with that is people ask questions, and people are all over the world, so you can see answers pretty much any time. But it scrolls by fast, you can't keep track. There's also the Google group, and this is a forum, so you can see different questions and the answers for that. There's also local meetups. I went to PDX Go. There's GoBridge for underrepresented communities. There's Women Who Go. And then you can have that as a place to meet new people, give talks, listen to talks. And then there's conferences, as you guys all know, because you're here. They're large-scale versions of meetups, usually multiple people speaking, longer events, and many of them are Go-specific. So there's GopherCon, which is the biggest one, as you guys heard earlier, getting the free ticket. There's India, Dubai, Brazil. There's Golang UK. There's .go, GoLab, which is in Italy and actually upcoming still. And there's GothamGo, as you hopefully all know, because you're here. And there's a bunch of other ones, too. Every year, there's just more and more added, and kind of hard to keep track. I actually didn't know GoLab existed until a few days ago. And then, yeah, image credits. I didn't make any of them besides the initial Intel Snap turtle. And, yeah. So thanks. And go race and go first.
Awesome. Thank you, Tiffany.